And they're just 4 20-minute, half-hour programs, but they're just. All right, everyone, good evening. Just a couple of quick announcements. I want to remind you about turning cell phones to silent and that there is childcare. So if you need that, especially any folks that are streaming, come join us. If you have kids, bring them. And I think that's it. Robbie, you got anything? Okay, we'll get started.
Yeah, I have nothing tonight. This clip is so tight. Testing. I'm on? Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the third class in the series relating to the spiritual teacher. In the first class, I said we may only go 4 classes, but I'm finding more and more material, so we'll definitely have 2 more classes. And do you have anyone who's here for the first time tonight? A couple of people? Okay, glad to have you here. You standing up in the back. Have you ever been here before? Okay. Okay. Well, glad to have you here. We'll begin with some prayers from the Gold Prayer Book. Get a copy of that, and then we'll follow that up with some meditation. And these prayers may not mean a lot, but you can just read along. We'll be on page 34. And we'll start with taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. We'll read that 3 times. We'll read all of them in English. Then we'll read the 4 immeasurables. Then we'll read the 7-limb prayer, and pay attention to that one while we read it, because I'm going to talk a little bit about that later this evening. And then we'll do our short mandala offering at the end. Okay. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, action, and imagined. I declare all my negative action accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence, and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merit and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnirya Tayami. Okay, so we've said the prayers, which are said to prepare our mind for the discussion that's to follow, in the same way that we till the soil and amend it before we cast the seeds there. Soften our mind a little bit after a day where we probably weren't 100% occupied with virtuous thoughts. But that's okay. That's samsara. That's the world we live in. So we'll do some meditation. We've all had some, or most of us have had some experience by now, so we'll go a little bit longer. So we begin by checking our posture. Our back is a little bit straighter than we normally sit. Not tense or rigid, but just a little more erect. Our head not tilted to one side or the other, but maybe just a couple degrees in front of the vertical. Our eyes either just very slightly open or lightly closed, but not clenched, tightly closed. Our lips slightly closed, not pursed. Our tongue up against the roof of our mouth. Our jaw is relaxed. Our shoulders are down. You may want to let them shrug once or twice, and back just a little bit so our chest is opened up slightly. All of this is said to open some of the energy channels that are just in front of the spine, that the winds that our mind rides upon travel up and down. Our upper arms are away from the torso, and our hands are either lightly on each knee or right hand on left, with thumbs touching slightly below our navels. If we're sitting on a cushion, we sit towards the front of the cushion, the front third, so that our hips open up and our legs are in a position that we find comfortable. If we're sitting on a chair, our feet are either flat on the floor or on a cushion underneath them. The point of the posture is not for it to be rigid or uncomfortable or a source of tension, but to be stable, self-maintaining, and once established, non-distracting as we proceed with the meditation. So take a minute, just scan your body starting at the top of the head and work down. And if there are any sources of tension or discomfort that you're aware of, address them now so they don't become a continuing issue during the meditation. And having established our posture, we're going to begin with a very simple version of what's referred to as the 9-round breathing. And this is using our breath and the nervous system of the body to calm our mind, calm our body. Physiologically, what's happening is as we breathe in and pull our diaphragm down, we're actually stimulating the vagus nerve, which slows our heart rate, slows our breathing just very slightly, so that our mind comes to that more concentrated, focused area. It's not a type of breathing we want to do for long periods of time, because we can actually drop our blood pressure to the point that we faint, and that's not the goal here. But this is just to get us to that more concentrated, calmer state of mind. So in this version, there are many versions of the 9-round breathing. We'll take the index finger of the right hand, close our left nostril, do 3 deep breaths in and out through the right nostril, with the stomach expanding on the in-breath and contracting back towards the spine on the out-breath. We do that 3 times. Then we take the index finger of the right hand, close our right nostril, 3 breaths in and out through the left nostril. And then we do 3 breaths in and out through both nostrils, always with the stomach expanding. So you can do this at your own speed and count to yourself. And after you've done that, allow your breathing to return to its normal pattern. And now we allow our breathing to return to its normal pattern. And we begin by setting our motivation for the meditation that follows. And as we've discussed, any motivation is a valid one. If we just are here out of curiosity, that's great. If we want to make our mind a little bit calmer and maybe even a little happier, that's wonderful. But it's said that the most powerful motivation, the one that gives the most force and energy to our spiritual practice, is what's referred to as the bodhicitta motivation. And that's the thought that I am doing this meditation so that I can reach the state of enlightenment, complete compassion and complete wisdom, not just for myself, but so that I can be of benefit to all living beings. I'm doing this meditation so I can become enlightened for the benefit of all. Not just my family, not just my friends and the people I like, but the people I don't like, the people I've never met, the beings that I'm not even aware of. And that's not a natural way for us to think it. It's something we have to kind of generate effortfully initially, and that's okay. But just stay with that thought for a moment. And having set our motivation, we now begin our actual meditation session. The chosen object is the breath, the physical sensation of the breath moving in and out through our nostrils. We place our mind, our concentration on that. The physical movement of air in and out through our nostrils. Nothing more, nothing less than that. Direct perception, not visualizing it, not imagining it, not describing it to ourselves, but just mind directly perceiving the breath. So that we could almost say the mind and the breath, the awareness and the object of which it is aware, are so similar as to be indistinguishable. And as soon as we've noticed that our mind has wandered off to another object, which it inevitably will do, we set that object aside and come back to the breath. Not being rough or harsh with ourselves, but just gently bringing the mind back over and over and over again. And that's the meditation. Now we can end our meditation with a dedication. We can acknowledge that we've done something out of the ordinary, something that has made a positive imprint, however small, on our mind stream. And we think, may that positive energy not be lost, but may it ripen and grow in my mind stream in a way that will be of benefit to all living beings. And you can relax your concentration. Any questions or comments on that meditation practice? Anything that's coming up for people with the posture, the practice itself, your meditation at home? Everybody seems quite comfortable with it. I don't hear much wiggling or moaning or groaning or anything like that. Okay. Tonight we'll continue our discussion of relating to the spiritual teacher or spiritual friend, as we discussed in the first class. Just to review a little bit, last week we talked about some of the qualities that we should look for if we're looking for a spiritual teacher. And it's not like we have to get up off the cushion tonight and start looking everywhere for a spiritual guide. But if we feel that that is something that would be useful to us, we need to start looking and checking people out. It's not something that should be done in haste. In some texts they say we should take 3 years before determining if someone is a qualified teacher. Other texts they say we should take 12 years. Some of us may feel we may need to move a little bit faster than that. But if we're looking for a spiritual teacher, it certainly doesn't mean that we can't go to teachings and listen to them and read books and watch things on YouTube. But we're talking about a little bit more special relationship when we're saying picking out a spiritual friend. So there were, the Buddha said there are a minimum of, not a minimum, but there are 10 qualities that you should look for, with the understanding that having these qualities completely is extremely rare, and you're probably not going to find someone who scores 100 on every one of these 10 qualities. But these are a good sort of framework as you listen to teachings and spend time around someone and watch their behavior to decide if you would like to get a little bit more serious with them. So can anybody remember what the 10 qualities were? Start off with the first 3.
Disciplined mind, calm mind, and thoroughly calmed mind.
You want to repeat that for the masses? Yes.
A disciplined mind, calm mind, and a thoroughly calm mind.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Disciplined mind behaves ethically. Doesn't harm
The
others.
first quality is someone who behaves ethically. Their mind is at least disciplined enough that they're not killing and stealing and raping and getting drunk and all this stuff. Their behavior is not behavior that harms other people or causes agitation in other people's minds. That's something we can may see somewhere. The behavior of someone we're considering as a teacher may disturb people's minds, and that's considered unethical at the highest standard. Okay. That's the
calm
first.
mind is high level of concentration.
Yeah, someone who's developed some powers of concentration. And
The third one, thoroughly calm mind, is they've developed wisdom and that they see things as they really are.
Yeah, particularly the wisdom of understanding the concept of no self, no
self.
I, okay, which is a reality, a wisdom-based teaching. Okay. Anybody else want to take a stab at some of the other 7? Thank you, Gary. Anybody else remember? Okay, Christy. I don't have these memorized either.
I was going to say, I might not get them in order.
Yeah.
But the one was having compassion for the student was
Yeah,
one of the most important.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that's probably the most important, that the teacher have compassion for the student, deep concern for the well-being of the student. Okay?
And the wording might not be right, but present the Dharma eloquently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's eloquence and skill in presenting the Dharma, which means in a way that speaks to you as a student, that you feel that he's talking to you or she's talking to you, which doesn't necessarily mean, Hollywood or Broadway eloquence if people know Lama Zopa or Rinpoche. It's a very unique style. Some people find it very off-putting, so you may not be the right teacher for that. Everybody doesn't have the same teacher, but other people find it very personal and very warm, and it speaks to them. So they would say that he's quite eloquent. Okay, so that's 5. We got 5 more left. Anybody want to take a stab?
Knows more than the student.
Yeah, you want a teacher who knows more than you do. That's kind of common sense. Okay.
Energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah, and likes has some enthusiasm for the teachings.
Commitment to the student.
Yes. Yeah, this is where even if the teacher has to repeat things 3, 4, 5 times and then comes back and nobody remembers what she says, she's still willing to continue. Okay, a deep commitment, like we have with our family members, for example. Okay, good. So that's how many have we gotten? That's 8. 2 more. Okay.
I've got the 2 unless somebody else wants.
Anybody? Go ahead. Show off.
I have them written down.
Okay.
Realization of emptiness.
Yeah, realization of emptiness, which is similar to the very calm mind, but refers to a deeper sense of understanding of reality. And they may not have this completely, but they have some understanding and commitment to seeing things as they are. And there's one more.
Vast resources of learning.
Yeah, has more than is playing with has a lot of options when they're teaching you. They just can't teach you one meditation practice and that's it. If that doesn't work for you, you're abandoned. But they are familiar with lots of teachings, lots of meditation practice, have an understanding of the human psyche. Okay, so just to review them again, I'll give them in the official order. There's a disciplined mind, an ethical mind. There's a calmed mind, the ability to concentrate. There is a very calm mind, which means a mind that understands the concept of non-self, no I. And that's not the subject of this class, but that's an emptiness teaching. Knows more than the student, is energetic, enthusiastic about teaching, has a vast array of learning to draw upon, has a realization or at least a deep understanding of all the emptiness teachings, is eloquent and skillful in presenting the Dharma in a way that speaks to the student, is deeply compassionate for the student, wants the student to be free from suffering, probably the most important characteristic, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, and has a commitment to doing whatever it takes to teach the student, even if the student is not a good student. Okay? So those are the qualities we look for in a teacher. As I said, we may not see all of them in someone. We shouldn't reject someone as a teacher because they're not perfect examples of all 10 of those. This is kind of the ideal of what a teacher would be. And so we have to kind of look and see. And someone who meets most of those characteristics may be a candidate for a teacher. Did you want to say something? Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
Why is the concept of emptiness considered so critical in a teacher?
That I cannot answer. That's a good question for a Geshe. That's our that's our safety. Whenever you're sitting up here and you don't know the answer, you say, "Oh, that's a good question for a Geshe." I just think I can't answer that specifically, but just because that is so important to all the teachings of the Buddha as presented in the Tibetan tradition, if the teacher has no concept of emptiness, then according to the Buddhist teachings, they're deluded. They're not seeing reality, which means they can't see you as a student as you really are. They can't see the teachings of the Buddha. It's just kind of like, it's just kind of a basic requirement as a teacher to at least have some understanding of it. That's about all I can say. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? That's a good question. Up here.
The three marks of existence, at least in the Theravadan tradition, is dukkha, anicca, anatta. So suffering, non-self, and impermanence.
Yeah.
So considering that, I guess
Yeah.
non-self or emptiness is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. How many people were here for the video the first week? Most people here. Who thought it was weird? I did. Or not weird, but I thought, and this is, I'm talking about, I know all the people in that video. Okay. They are not cult members and they are not brain dead, anything like that. They are all very sincere practitioners who have a very deep experience of what we refer to as guru yoga or guru devotion. And that's an extremely complicated area of practice. And relating to a spiritual teacher does not necessarily mean that you have to have that kind of relationship with a spiritual guide. There are different ways of approaching the spiritual teacher, with that being the most elevated in a way, or the most elaborate. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are on the path and the different levels of teachings and how this all kind of ties in. So I'm going, tonight there'll be some more definitions or organizational terms. The Buddha gave two large categories of teachings of the Buddha. Does anybody know what those are? Two categories of teaching? Compassion and wisdom. I'm looking for foreign words here. He said compassion and wisdom. Sutra is one, and what's the other? Tantra, okay? Yeah, two big categories. Sutra and Tantra. Sometimes you'll refer to here I'm referred to as the Sutrayana. Anybody know what yana means? Yeah, path actually means vehicle, okay. Okay, so the sutra vehicle and the Tantrayana. And sometimes the Tantrayana is also referred to as the Vajrayana. What does Vajra mean? Close. Diamond, okay? The diamond path or the tantric path, okay? Two main categories. The sutra teachings are the actual recorded teachings that the Buddha gave during his lifetime, during the 60 whatever years they lived in northern India. Most of them were recorded, written down after his death, usually most of them within the 100 years after his death. How many sutras are there? Anybody know? 84,000. There are a lot, okay? And most of them are very long, and they are very hard to understand, and we almost never study the sutras in the Buddhist tradition. It's very bizarre. The Buddha gave all these teachings, and we almost never read the actual teachings. Have you noticed that? We read commentaries on the teachings, and we read commentaries on the commentaries. But in terms of actually reading the sutras, that's very rarely done. One that we do read is the Heart Sutra, which is only 2 pages, but is quite dense and very cryptic in a lot of ways. But if you look at all these, this library of Tibetan text here, I don't know if people have seen these. These are, if you unwrap one of these, and I'm not going to do it, it's block prints on paper, okay? There may be a couple hundred in here. They're long here, and the wood block prints, and the pages are not numbered, and there are no titles on the exterior, but somehow the Geshis can find what they need when they want to. These are the sutras in Tibetan, okay? Just about all the major sutras are in here in this library. Okay, so the sutra teachings are the open teachings of the Buddha, the ones that he gave openly during his lifetime. And we can break those teachings down into 2 categories, main teachings. Does anybody know what I'm thinking of here? Yeah.
Wild guess, but conventional and ultimate.
That's a wild guess. It's a good one, but it's not the one what I'm looking for. Okay.
Would it be lay teachings and
No.
teachings?
Okay. Well, there are 2 major types of teachings that the Buddha gave here, 2 great divisions. There are yanas also. Mahayana, yeah. Yeah, okay, there's Mahayana and Hinayana. Okay, these are both sutra paths, okay? Sutra teachings. Hinayana. Hinayana is the self-liberation vehicle. Mahayana is the greater vehicle, the Bodhisattva, Bodhicitta vehicle. Hinayana teachings are the main teachings in the types of Buddhism we find in Southeast Asia, okay, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on. The Mahayana teachings include the Hinayana teachings, and these are the Mahayana path is Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Mongolian Buddhism, and a couple others. So the Hinayana is the path of self-liberation. And the aspiration is to nirvana. Okay? Mahayana teachings are liberation for all, liberation of all, not just self, but all, and the goal is enlightenment. Okay? Excuse me? Nirvana and enlightenment are not the same. Okay? Can anybody tell me the difference between nirvana and enlightenment? Let's wait for the what's our count tonight, Brian? Oh, they're holding steady. Good.
I may be wrong, but I think nirvana is said to be what you achieve when you're liberated, when you realize emptiness and you become liberated, and then full enlightenment comes with greater wisdom beyond that omniscience. And
yeah, that's close. Nirvana is the end of personal suffering. Okay, the end of suffering. Okay, you liberate yourself from the causes of suffering. So this is the end of personal suffering. Mahayana adds to that the development of bodhicitta, complete compassion. Okay, so this is the wisdom teachings, and the Mahayana adds the compassion teachings, which is is not to imply that Hinayana Buddhists or Theravada Buddhists aren't interested in compassion. They really are inseparable, but this is just kind of the technical distinction between the two. Okay, so these are Mahayanists study the Hinayana teachings, and actually the Hinayanas study some of the Mahayana teachings. But these are all the sutra teachings, the open teachings that the Buddha gave. And that's 99.9% of what we study here at Kadampa Center. Karma, death and impermanence, emptiness, bodhicitta. These are all sutra teachings. Okay? Now, according to Tibetan Buddhism and some of the other Buddhist traditions, the sutra teachings are not enough to get you to complete enlightenment. Okay, you have to add to that the tantric teachings, and these are sometimes referred to as the secret teachings. These are teachings that you receive in an initiation from a spiritual friend. Okay, they traditionally were not discussed publicly, though that's changed completely over the last 100 years. And they're based on complex meditations where you use the meditational deities that you see around here, like green Tara, okay, or Chenrezig. They're very complex meditation practices that you are given permission to do by the spiritual teacher, by the tantric master, and they're used to remove the very subtle obstacles to obtaining complete enlightenment. And everybody I know who's a serious tantric meditator says that the point of Tantra is to understand the sutra more deeply. It's not like you're adding extra material here. It's helping you to come to a deeper understanding of what's in the sutra. And this is where you hear people going off and doing 3-year meditation retreats. Typically, that's a tantric retreat. Okay? So 2 levels of teaching. These are quite open. These traditionally were secret. Now they're given quite openly. His Holiness the Dalai Lama may give a tantric initiation to an audience of 10,000 people. Okay? But again, it's something that you need to have permission from the teacher to participate in, theoretically. Otherwise, it can cause real problems. And it's not something that we talk a lot about here at Kadampa Center. In the Discovering Buddhism series of modules, the first 12 are about the sutra teachings, and then the last module is the only one that really touches on the tantric teachings. Okay? So, the implication is that a spiritual teacher for someone on the sutra path is going to be very different from a spiritual teacher or spiritual friend from someone who's entered the tantric path. Okay, the tantric path is where these terms guru yoga or guru devotion really come into practice. And this is where in your tantric meditations, you have a tantric master, you actually see him or her as indistinguishable from the Buddha, as embodying all the qualities of wisdom and compassion that the Buddha had, and then you imagine that you yourself have those same qualities also. And that's what's involved in a tantric meditation. It's typically you may take green Tara, this deity over here, who's an aspect of enlightened action, and you would see your tantric master or spiritual friend as indistinguishable from green Tara, and then you would imagine that you become indistinguishable. So it's really a melding of the three, and it's supposed to be a very speedy way of removing these final obstacles to enlightenment. So a spiritual friend, if we're on the tantric path, is a whole nother kettle of fish from what most of us are looking for when we come here to Kadampa Center, or if we go off to a meditation retreat with Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Even that, you go for the month-long retreat he gives up in the mountains here in North Carolina every other year. He's talking sutra for the entire month. There may be some tantric initiations at the end, but a tantric initiation is always preceded by sutra teachings, okay? That's a necessary part of it. So what we look for in a spiritual friend here, or the way we see them, okay, is not necessarily seeing them as the Buddha or as the enlightened being the way we have to when we enter into tantric practices. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit so people won't think that after watching the movie or what they read, if you want a spiritual teacher, it has to be this very mystical, devotional, completely devotional, giving up self sort of relationship. Okay, we're here, most of us are here on the sutra path. So what we're looking for in a spiritual friend is what's in that list as much as possible. Comments, questions?
So I understand that when you do things like take refuge or accept teachings from a specific person, then that person becomes your teacher. So what are the different levels that you relate to them?
Yeah.
Or how does that change your relationship with them?
That's a very, I was going to get to that. Thanks for, no, that's good. Okay. We say, how do I get a spiritual teacher? The official way is that you take vows from them. If you take vows from someone, they are your spiritual teacher. Not necessarily the only one you'll have, but that relationship changes, okay? The simplest level is the refuge vows, okay, which we give at Kadampa Center here at least once a year, sometimes more frequently. It's just the vows to enter into the path. They're the bodhisattva vows, which are a more advanced level of practice. And then every time you take a tantric initiation, you're taking tantric vows. So each of those set of vows, every time, and if you were to take robes and you were to take the vows of a monk or nun, you're also taking those from someone. So anytime you take vows from someone, that person is considered, till the end of endless time, your spiritual friend, okay? So it's something that you should do with someone you've checked out, not something to do lightly. Yeah, is that what?
Yeah, does that mean that you interact with them differently?
Well, that's a good question. You go to a teaching by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he's going to give, before he gives the tantric initiation, he's going to give the refuge vows. He's going to give the bodhisattva vows. Sometimes it's so quick you don't even know it. So you can just sit there and listen, but if you're actually mentally taking those vows, you're one of 10,000 people, okay? It doesn't mean that now His Holiness is going to say, yeah, let's have lunch together or something, okay? Most student-teacher relationships are quite distant. They do not depend on being physically close to the teacher, okay? You hear all these stories about people setting up appointments with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, ask him what kind of dog they should get or things like that. It's not like a buddy, okay? Most of the times you don't even have access to them to ask about your spiritual practice. So it's not a personal, I think Alex Berzin refers to it as it's a personally impersonal sort of relationship most of the time, okay? But, and we'll talk about this, if you take vows from someone, your attitude towards them definitely should change. If you're acknowledging them as your teacher, the way you regard them, it will be different, okay? Yeah. See, and the question back there.
So one person can have multiple spiritual teachers?
Yeah. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is talks all the time about, I received this initiation from my teacher here. I received this initiation from this spiritual teacher. I learned this text from this spiritual teacher. Most people who are practicing at that level have someone who they identify as their root guru, which is the number one, among many. But you can have many spiritual teachers. Okay?
For the Tantra, it sounds like that's a very special teacher. Is that correct?
It's someone you should check out very closely before you take a tantric initiation. Okay.
Thank you.
Even more so than just when you're on the sutra path. Yeah. Let's see. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So here we are doing a lot of tantra, We are
No, we're not doing a lot of tantra here. We're doing mantras, okay?
Right.
Mantras is not tantra, okay? Mantra is not tantra, okay? Tantric meditations involve mantra, but the mantra recitations we do here at Kadampa Center are not tantric practices, okay? Yeah, good question though, really, yeah. Okay, yeah, mantra and tantra are not the same, yeah. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So you can forget that I ever brought up Tantra, since I'm not qualified. But those are the secret teachings, and they weren't necessarily they weren't necessarily written down during the Buddha's lifetime or even within the 100 years after his lifetime. They were said to manifest in various avatars and archetypes and things. So it's all very strange, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one more question. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Before I close the lid on Tantra.
Is there a physical relationship as sexual relationship when a tantra comes to the teacher and student between?
Between the teacher and... Oh, that's a great question for a beginner's class. Is there a sexual relationship in Tantra between the teacher and student? Okay. All the tantric meditations are the highest, they're different levels of Tantra, okay? And don't anybody quote me on this because I'm not an expert on this. There are 4 levels of tantric practices, okay? The lowest is Kriya Tantra, the highest is Highest Yoga Tantra, and those are almost the only 2 practices that you hear much about. The other 2 are not that common. In the Highest Yoga Tantra, okay, this may shock some people, the meditation always involves the deity, like Green Tara or Chinrezig, and consort. Okay, sexual partner. At some point, you always envision them in sexual union. Okay? Now, what does the union of the deity and their consort represent? Yeah, okay. Yeah. You can just say it and I'll repeat it.
I think it's bliss and void.
Bliss and void, yeah, that's one. And they also represent wisdom and compassion at a simpler level, okay? Wisdom being the female, compassion being the male. They're actually in sexual intercourse. And then at a higher level, it's a union of bliss and voidness, okay? So that is always part of a highest yoga tantra. You actually visualize it, you meditate on it. And you probably haven't realized this, but we have Kala Chakra here, okay? And this is two people, this is two beings, they're in sexual intercourse. I mean, the male actually, if you go down and take this thing apart, which nobody's allowed to do, the male actually has an erect penis, which is in the female's vagina, okay? The male is facing this way, the female is facing that way, but since they all have multiple faces, that's kind of irrelevant. Okay, so they're actually in sexual union in this statue right here, okay? At the simplest level, the union of wisdom and compassion. At a more complex level, it's bliss and voidness. And then at the most, well, I'm not going to say the most, but at an even more profound level, you visualize on the red substance from the female and the white substance from the male, okay? And that represents the most subtle consciousness that's carried forward at the time of death to the next lifetime, that if you can channel it, if you can control it, you can become enlightened at the moment of death, okay? So that's part of highest yoga tantra meditations. Now the question, you hear all these stories that at certain levels, the teacher instructs the practitioner to find a consort. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know anybody who's been told that necessarily to go out and find a consort so you can practice controlling the red and the white drops at the moment of death, but that's the purpose of that kind of practice. Not for the sexual pleasure right now, but so you get an experience both of bliss and voidness, and that you learn to have some sort of control over that experience, and you can use it at the time of death. It's practicing for death to throw your consciousness forward. Thank you for asking that question. I don't know how we got into that. I'll probably get excommunicated or something now if anybody finds out about this. Yeah. Okay? Yeah, so, but, so that's how, I think that's how the word tantra in the West has become associated with sexual practices to a large degree. A lot of people hear the word tantra and that's what it leads into. But at the level we're practicing, forget I even said any of that, yeah. Okay, other questions? Not about sex. Okay. Okay. That's, oh gosh. So we talked about the qualities of a spiritual teacher. What are the qualities of a student? I mentioned them briefly last week. Typically they identify three, if we want to be a good student, there are three qualities we should have or we should develop. Okay?
Figured since I was close, you wouldn't have to get up. The student should have an open mind.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about this as the last question came up, the ability to judge right and wrong.
Yeah, or common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And enthusiasm for the teachings.
Yeah, okay. The first is an open mind, okay, which doesn't mean being a sieve, okay, but it means being aware of your own preconceptions, your own judgment, okay, being open to things you've never heard before, Okay, I didn't say accept them, okay? But being open, say, okay, I'm going to hear this, I'm going to take it and check it against my own experience. Okay? Combined with number 2, a sense of right and wrong, or just basic common sense. When you enter into a relationship with a spiritual teacher, you don't become stupid, okay? You don't lose your sense of right and wrong. You don't give up all your morals, okay? If they tell you to do something that you feel is wrong, you should not do it, okay? You keep your own natural wisdom, your common sense, okay? You're open, you listen, but then you test it out against your own experience. And then third, enthusiasm. That keeps you working, dedicated to the path, willing to put what the teacher has taught you into practice. It's always said that that's the greatest gift we can give our teachers, is putting their teachings into practice. You know, not bringing them money, not buying them a fancy car, but actually taking their teachings and putting them into practice. That's the greatest gift we can give to a teacher. Okay? So so it's a lot easier being a student than being a teacher, okay? But just being open-minded can be a struggle at times. And then lots of times they use the analogy of a metallurgist who takes the ore and analyzes it. And we bring that level of critical thinking to it to see if it's really gold or if it's some mixture of gold and inferior quality stuff, or if it's just fool's gold. So we should be like an analyzer of what's presented to us. And then when we do that and we find that it's true and it speaks to us, then we should be enthusiastic to put it into practice. Okay? Any questions or comments about that? Yeah, Lord. Mm-hmm.
When you take a teacher, does the teacher have a responsibility back to you as a student? I mean, like you said, the Dalai Lama will give a teaching to 10,000 people.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of hard for him to personally.
Does he owe you anything?
No.
Yeah.
Or does he? I don't know what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I know that Lama Zopa Rinpoche says prayers for all his students, not necessarily individually, but for example, everyone who's come to his teaching, he will say prayers for them and do practices for their benefit.
Okay, and like Geshe Sangpo did the 100,000 prostrations with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've never seen any specific listing of what the responsibilities of a teacher are. That may be kind of variable, but yeah.
They might tell you that they don't want to be your teacher too,
exactly.
right?
That can be, if you have the opportunity one-on-one, they may say no. Okay? Now, if you're sitting in a crowd of 5,000, you're not screened. You know, you don't have to fill out a questionnaire or anything. If you go and you take vows from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, just because you bought a ticket, you know, that is a student-teacher relationship. Okay. And I'm sure he feels some responsibility for all the people there, even though he doesn't even have a list.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. But this is a great thing about being part of the FPMT. If someone who is close to you dies, and you want prayers said for them, we have a method where we can forward them. The FPMT has access to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you get that name put on his prayer list.
So how long?
Typically for 6 to 7 weeks after the death, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Okay, Chrissy.
I had a couple different thoughts about that, sometimes you ask a teacher, and I can't reference where I read this, but that's part of the teacher testing you and your ability to be a student is maybe your enthusiasm to ask and ask and ask again, maybe I think 3 times or
Yeah, they say particularly if you
like-
want a specific teaching, like say I want some teachings on Chenrezig and compassion. It said you should ask the first couple times. The teacher may say no, and said you should ask on a minimum of 3 different times before you give up, before you accept that maybe this is not the right thing at the right time.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
that's
the
not
enthusiasm.
necessarily about the relationship.
Yeah.
Just like for each, like this kind of relationship of, how a student should act. And this is kind of what my meditation led me to this week, is the ability to judge right and wrong is difficult when I want to argue with whether my teacher knows more than me or not. And when I get an answer back that I'm not happy with, is that my delusion or theirs?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
Yeah. So maybe just set that advice aside for a while. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So I just wanted to describe a few things about the way we can relate to our teachers when we're on the Sutrayana path. Okay. When we're not necessarily seeing the teacher as the Buddha, as a completely enlightened being, but we do see them as a spiritual teacher. Okay. We talked about taking the vows. That kind of formalizes the process. Okay. First thing is to focus on their good qualities, okay? And not deny their shortcomings. If we do see shortcomings, it's not like we become blind to them. We acknowledge them, but we concentrate on their good qualities. The fact that we've accepted them as a spiritual teacher means that we do see certain good qualities on them. And that is what we should concentrate on. That is what we should bring to mind when we think about them. That's what we should bring to mind when we're in their presence. The analogy they give is if you were looking at someone standing outside that window, you'd only see them from the waist up. You know that they would have legs in the lower half of their body, but what you see, what you concentrate on, is the upper half of the body, their good qualities. Okay, you're not denying that they may have flaws at this level. Okay, you can acknowledge this or that. That he doesn't take a bath often enough. Okay, but that's not what I'm going to concentrate on, or that he can speak harshly. But I know he's doing it out of compassion. Okay, concentrate on the teacher's good qualities. Okay, that's the first aspect of how we can relate to a teacher on the Sutrayana path. The second way is to think about their kindness. Okay? To remind ourselves over and over that by giving us teachings, that is the kindest thing that they can possibly do for us. Even when we become enlightened, completely wise and completely compassionate, all we can do for others is teach them. Okay? A Buddha cannot remove my suffering. Okay? The Buddha can just show me the way that I can remove my suffering. So when a teacher is giving us the teachings, they are being incredibly kind to us. Said they're being even kinder than the historical Buddha, because they are imparting the teachings directly to us. So that's the second way we can relate to a teacher in the Sutrayana path, is just think over and over how kind they are to give me these teachings that will help me end my suffering. Okay? And the third way is the third thing we can do in the Sutrayana path is think about how we want to strengthen that relationship. How we want to create the karmic causes for the relationship between us and our teacher to continue, to become become stronger and more valuable. So we can meditate on strengthening that relationship. And this goes back to the prayers. One of the prayers that we say at the beginning, the 7-limb prayer, okay, it said we should think about that in terms of our teachers. Okay, that's one way to strengthen that connection of our teachers, is to meditate about, concentrate on them while we're reciting the 7-limb prayer. So the first limb, or first line, is, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. Okay, which means not that we're worshiping them as a god, but we're acknowledging that they have wisdom that we lack. Second one is we make offerings, both physical. I mean, it's wonderful to bake a cake and take it to your teacher's house if you're that close with them. If you don't have that kind of close physical relationship, you can imagine, you can visualize that you're giving them all the wonderful things in the world. Okay? We declare all our negative actions. Okay? We are open, and again, we may not actually do this one-on-one, but we can imagine that we're confessing all our worst habits to our teachers. We can rejoice in the teacher's wonderful actions, and of all his or her students' wonderful actions, rejoice in the merit of others. We can pray, we can request them, we can hope that they will have a long life, that they will and the next to last line, turn the wheel of Dharma, that they will continue to teach. Okay, there are very many highly realized beings who, for some reason or another, realize it's best to stop teaching. Okay, but we can hope, wish that they will continue to teach, and then we dedicate all this positive energy to all beings becoming enlightened. Okay, so that's the 7-limb prayer, something we read here all the time, and we just do it by rote. But if you think of your spiritual teachers in this lifetime, while you're reciting that, that's is said to strengthen that connection that you have with the teaching. It's said to change your mind so that you are more receptive to hearing what they have to say. Okay? So 3 ways we can relate to our teacher: concentrating on their good qualities while not denying their flaws, okay? Thinking about their kindness and doing practices or thinking how we can strengthen that connection that we have with them. So those are some relatively simple ways that we can relate to a spiritual teacher now without getting into all the guru yoga and guru devotion, more advanced practices. We'll talk about those a little bit more, but this is, for most of us, this is plenty to deal with. Any questions or comments? Okay. So we can do our dedication prayers. Next week we're going to talk about unhealthy student-teacher relationships, and there are plenty of those, and there's a lot to say there. Okay? Page 246 from Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome pears bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be free. Find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. for as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain. Until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, thank you, everyone. We have 2 more classes, and there's plenty of material to cover. I don't know why I thought we might be able to do this in 4 weeks.
And tonight's homework is just outside the door here on the little table.
Thank you, Linda.